Environment is one of those things that can massively influence a fight.
You're using Bonetti's defense against me, huh?
I thought it fitting, considering the rocky terrain.
Always mind your surroundings.
I have the high ground.
And yet, it doesn't seem to be something that's covered very much in the medieval manuscripts that I've studied. There's a vague quote by Fiore where he talks about having to fight in strange places when fencing against the false masters. And we can see in the warbook of Ludwig von Abe that he suggests fighting with the sun to your back so that your opponent has the light in their eyes. We also see from Talhofer some kind of barrier that's been erected as an arena. And in later manuscripts such as that of Meyer, we can see students fighting in a salle d'armes. But environment is crucial. It decides whether or not your opponent is going to be coming at you one at a time or all at once. Decides the ease with which you're going to give or take ground, or how mobile you're going to be when fighting. There are things that you can do in an arena, a fencing hall, an octagon, a boxing ring, or that weird wobbly platform thing from Flash Gordon that you couldn't really get away with in any other environment. During the medieval period, there were campaigning seasons for a reason. If it's too hot or too cold, your body's going to have to work harder to regulate its temperature. Most famously at the Battle of Hattin, many crusading soldiers basically cooked in their armour due to the heat of their environment. Classical and medieval night battles were rare, but they did happen. Usually this was in the form of a raid. Commanders would often take the opportunity to manoeuvre their soldiers or get them out of a tight spot. Like Hannibal of Carthage when he was penned in by the Romans, strapping torches to the horns of bulls and sending them towards the Romans so that they freaked out thinking there was some sort of night demon coming at them, giving Hannibal the chance to slip away in the dark. Battling in the mist or the morning fog was not unheard of. At the Battle of Barnet, during the Wars of the Roses, one flank turned on the other, not realizing that they were killing their own after they had already technically won the fight. Let's have a look at some of these environments and what it's like to fight in them. Fighting in the forest can be tricky, as trees and roots and rocks make for unpredictable obstacles. Depending on whether or not it's been raining recently, the ground can be treacherous, and sometimes your feet can get tied up in the underbrush. These are all things that you can obviously use to your advantage as well. The ground is sometimes a lot spongier, which is easier on the knees, so when you're getting on a little bit, you know, that's a bit helpful. In a one-on-one fight, the forest is fine to have a good scrap. As part of a formation, it kind of does make it awkward to keep your line. If you're fighting on a ludicrously sunny day, it does mean that you will have some shade and there's less risk of fighting with the sun in your eyes.
Nice.
I really like fighting in the forest, and I'm going to give it 4 burnt Anakins out of 5. Anakins? ShanANAKINs. 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 Alright, obviously we have to talk about the high ground.
It's over, Anakin. I have the high ground. Right? Right?
Now I'm going to say this doesn't give you as much of an advantage as all that in a one-to-one fight. Obviously more effort is expended going up the hill to fight your opponent.
Oh, very good.
And when you step back, there's no ground to catch your rear foot, so you're falling backwards rather than just stepping back.
Alright.
If you are downhill, your head is a little bit more exposed because of the angles of attack, which will probably be exhausting, but you're having to hold your weapon higher to defend your head, which will tire you over time.
Oh, sorry.
But to the person who's holding the high ground, their legs are also somewhat more exposed. Passing backwards isn't easy either. This is something I suspect would be more of an advantage to larger numbers holding the high ground, as they're not exhausting themselves moving up to engage. I think this is something that would take me more time and practice to learn how to exploit the advantages of high ground, but I didn't feel that it was all that great in this context. I'm going to give it 2 burnt Anakins out of 5. Alright, let's talk about beaches. Now I would have liked to have trained in sand.
I don't like sand.
Now I'm guessing that fighting on sand you would have had less resistance underfoot, which would have made it harder to get any sort of traction. You would have been expending more energy to move, which would cause you to tire faster. I imagine wet sand would behave much like mud and either cause a bit of suction or for you to slide around. Now, unfortunately, I live in the south of Wales, and sandy beaches is not something that we really have in abundance around here. So we had to go to a pebble beach. Let's talk about the pebble beach. I really did not want to move at all here. Mobility was vastly reduced. I was slow to accelerate forward. I was really worried about rolling my ankle. Passing backwards, I felt like at any moment I was going to trip and fall. And the thing that was going to catch me was a bunch of fraggly rocks. There is no way on earth you are ever going to do things like the fleisch in this kind of environment. I mean, really speaking, the best thing to do would be like to pick up rocks and start throwing them at each other. I'm going to give this environment a... Yeah, I'm going to go 1 burnt Anakin. Now, I did want to fight in water as well, as ambushes did happen during river crossings. But yeah, that water at the Pebble Beach was so brown. I was not getting in that.
That is gross.
It is something I've done cutting drills in, and much the same as with the Pebble Beach. You don't trust your footing, you can't accelerate, you can't even see where you're putting your foot. And obviously fighting in water for people in armor was incredibly dangerous, because if you slip and fall, you're going to drown in your armor. This happened to Emperor Frederick Barbarossa on his way to the Crusades, fell off his horse into a river, drowned. I like fighting a lot in different environments because it gives me a better idea of context. One of the criticisms that I've received in the past is that I don't move enough when I'm fighting. I think that part of the reason for this is because I don't want to get used to hopping around as a lot of people do in fencing, only to then try it outdoors and end up sliding, falling on my arse, or drowning in a river, or, you know, any of the other stuff that I've talked about today. I would absolutely recommend that anybody, whatever you do, HEMA, Kendo, sports fencing, go do it outside. It's really, really informative. Now, if you've enjoyed this video, hit like and subscribe and all that good stuff. If you want more HEMA content in your life, you can head to my podcast. It's called Blades for Days. I talk about swords and sword fighting and probably way too much Star Wars stuff.